All of this is the impeachment debate, the whole thing. Every argument that's been on television, every Facebook post, every tweet, it all fits into this clean and somewhat simple structure called a flow. We use a flow because this structure tells us things that we wouldn't learn from any other source. With this flow, for example, we can see that these arguments up here are being completely conceded by the Republicans, whereas these assertions down here are being strenuously debated. By looking at this, we can tell that spending more time trying to prove, for example, that Trump held Ukraine funding would be a complete waste of time. The same way we can look down here and see that forgetting to ignore the source of corruption would be a failure for the pro-impeachment side. But the coolest thing we can learn, for example, is who will win the impeachment debate. And you heard that correctly. With the flow, you can predict with a fairly strong level of certainty how the debate will unfold and which argument will win. Pretty cool, huh? Well, let's dig into today's objective: how to identify the winning argument in the presidential impeachment debate. For this flow, we used color coordination to make it easy to read and to understand. We used blue ink for pro-impeachment arguments, commonly made by Democrats, and red ink for anti-impeachment arguments commonly made by Republicans. For the cards, the yellow cards are the harms, or the things that are wrong. The white card is the plan we have to fix those harms, which would be impeachment. And the green cards are the solvency, the proof that your plan will indeed work. Additionally, we have two orange cards representing the disadvantage argument that the anti-impeachment team is making. So that's the whole argument, and those are what the colors are. Now let's just sum up the arguments and defenses here before we double click into the cards. We want to make sure we're all on the same page with the narratives that are being told. On the pro-impeachment side, we have this narrative. President Donald Trump abused his power to interfere with an American election and then covered it up by obstructing Congress. These actions attack the heart of our democracy and corrupt it, and anyone doing them must be removed from their position of power. So we want to impeach and remove the president in order to restore the integrity of our democracy. These actions will work because interfering with elections would constitute a high crime and misdemeanor. Further, we must remove the president now. We cannot wait until an election because it was election meddling he's accused of doing. End quote. Right? That's, if the Democrats were to put a narrative together, that's what it would sound like. You could sum this up by saying, the president is corrupt and must be removed in order to save our government. That's the Cliff's Notes version. Now, for the anti-impeachment rebuttal, they would say something like, President Trump has not abused his power and President Trump has not obstructed Congress. Where you say he abused power with Ukraine, we say Trump was actually using all of his granted power to prevent our money from going into corrupt hands. Moreover, by doing this, the president is protecting the U.S. from even more corruption by potentially outing a corrupt presidential candidate, Joe Biden. We agree that tampering with elections is bad. We agree that it's a removable offense. And in fact, this entire proceeding is the result of a corrupt Congress trying to overturn the 2016 general election. You could sum this up by saying, the Democratic House of Representatives' intent with impeachment is corrupt and must be ignored and rejected in order to save our government. That would be the Cliff's Notes version of that. These narratives are the general narratives seen throughout the public debates, and if you look at the cards, you can see the individual sub-arguments that make up those narratives. When we double-click, we can see where this debate flow takes us. These cards represent the flowed arguments, these cards here on the right. Those in green are agreed arguments, ones that both sides agree to or are not debating with one another. And those in black are the contentious ones. We've done it this way so you can see what to focus on, right? If you want to debate and win, then our advice is always, no matter what the argument, stick to the black arguments, because those are the contentious ones. Those are the ones people are actually arguing and actually say are important to them. If you spend your time, for example, trying to prove that Trump held funding, you'd be wasting your time because no one's debating that, right? So if you're over here saying he held funding, the anti-impeachment folks are saying, yeah, we have no problem with that. What's your point, right? So looking at these cards, we can see that there are only a few items up for debate, which is also really cool, right? You could walk away right now with some really positive improvements because you've taken this very complex argument and you've got the 3 or 4 things that people are actually debating about. I mean, that's pretty helpful in its own sense. But if you look at these, in harms, everyone agrees that Trump held funding from Ukraine. Everybody agrees he asked for investigations, and everybody agrees he didn't meet with Zelensky at the White House. The contentious question here is, did the president stand to gain personally from these actions? And were they part of a quid pro quo? Those are the questions that we have left to answer and debate. We can see that everyone agrees the White House prevented folks from testifying and held back documents. The point to question here is, did the president do it because he was hiding something or because of a legal reason like executive privilege? And finally, we can see the big contentious question right here on the third card, which is Trump interfering in the elections or is he protecting the elections? That's the big question. If we go down to solvency, it's all green. Everyone agrees that the founding fathers were concerned about elections, that high crimes are crimes against the state, that elections should be protected, and democracy should be protected. Everybody agrees on all of those accounts. In the disadvantage, there seems to be no argument that the Democrats have an axe to grind. I haven't seen the Democrats put up any argument that they do not have an axe to grind. I have not seen the Democrats put up any argument that this has not been a fast process. It has been incredibly fast. And there seems to be no argument that the Dems have policy differences. They seem to embrace this. Yes, we do see things very differently than the president does, right? So all these 3 things go uncontested. There also seems to be no debate that wrongfully turning over an election is a very dangerous precedent. Everybody, both sides, seem to agree that turning over an election is a very dangerous precedent. What is up for debate is whether there is no evidence for this impeachment. So, standing back and looking, you can see that we're only debating a few things. If you were to write them out, you would see that we're only debating, 1, did only the president gain personally from the Ukraine investigations? 2, was the president holding people and documents in order to hide things and protect himself? 3, was the president interfering with an election or was he protecting our elections? And 4, was there evidence for the impeachment or was there not evidence for the impeachment? Now it's these bottom 2 questions on which everything rests. Even if the president gained personally from the Ukraine investigations and or tried to cover up his actions, the thing that makes them impeachable is the assertion that these actions corrupt our democracy. That's what the Democrats have hinged their entire argument on, right? Bringing in the lawyers of how is this impeachable? How is this an impeachable offense? How is it a high crime or misdemeanor? They have tied it to elections. It is a high crime or misdemeanor if it affects negatively our elections. So that's what they have to prove. So in order to justifiably remove the president from office, they would need to prove that the president interfered with an election. And we think that's where this debate is heading. Did the president attempt to use his power to interfere with the 2020 elections, as the impeachment case asserts? Or did the House of Representatives attempt to use its power to overturn the 2016 elections, as their argument and disadvantage suggest? This is the crux of the debate. This is what, if you want to win the debate, you have to debate this. You have to be able to debate this topic. Where does corruption come from in the United States in this sense? Is it a corrupt and rogue House of Representatives that is trying to overturn the 2016 election, or is it a corrupt and rogue president who is trying to rig the 2020 elections? That's what this debate has come down to. Right? Nobody's arguing whether or not the president did some of these things. What they are arguing is the intent behind them. Whether it's good intent to protect us or bad intent to hurt us. That's this whole thing, weeks and weeks and weeks. And the arguments have been presented and they flowed out into this. Who is more corrupt? And that's what will leave you up to all of you to debate. Until then, we say happy debating and have a great holiday season.